Hi, everyone. It's good to be with you today. My name is Jon Iuzzini. I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning at Achieving the Dream.
And I'm Bret Eynon. I'm retired after 40 years at City University of New York, the last 20 at LaGuardia Community College as Associate Provost.
We're excited to be here with you to share Achieving the Dream's framework for building institutional capacity for teaching and learning excellence. And an important part of our presentation today is to talk you through our brand new Teaching and Learning Toolkit. We're very excited about the release of this brand new resource and to share it with you today. So this is a resource for equity and educational change. It's an exciting new publication, 175 pages of resources and strategies that we'll be showing you during this session. It's designed to help faculty and campuses to improve student learning and success, to close equity gaps. This is applicable not only to the community colleges that make up most of the Achieving the Dream network, but to all higher education institutions. Throughout the resource, we take a strategic approach, linking transformative classroom practice to broader institutional policy change. So why a Teaching and Learning Toolkit? Well, our president and CEO, Dr. Karen Stout, delivered a really important lecture at North Carolina State University a couple of years ago and said, our collective reform efforts have not yielded the desired results. By almost any measure as community colleges, we are still not meeting our goals, particularly for low-income students and students of color, who now make up most of the students at our nation's community colleges. Over ATD's 15 years and so much other student success work that's gone on during a similar time frame, we're seeing an abundance of higher ed reform work, people working very hard to make change at the level of the institution, at the level of state systems, student success centers, but we have not fundamentally moved the needle on equity, on student success. And the key gap that we see is that most reform movements have overlooked faculty and the quality of teaching and learning. So ATD is focusing new attention on teaching, learning, and the support that full-time and part-time faculty need to create transformational learning experiences. This is our framework, and we call this our 4 cornerstones for building a culture of teaching and learning excellence. These are the conditions you would expect to see at institutions that are doing this work well and that are investing in meaningful ways towards building this culture of excellence in teaching and learning. The first 2 cornerstones speak to the importance of the work full-time and part-time faculty do. In the case of the first cornerstone, it's the work inside the classroom using evidence-based instructional practices. And for cornerstone number 2, this is about the collaborative partnerships that faculty engage in with their student affairs colleagues in shared efforts to cultivate learning and support student success. The third cornerstone speaks to creating a community on campus where educators and students are partners in active learning. Students are being socialized and engaged as active learners in their education, and likewise faculty are engaged in ongoing growth in their own professional learning journey. And the fourth cornerstone speaks to the need for college leaders, faculty leaders, shared governance processes to invest in professional learning and to embrace it for continuous improvement and to realign related expectations in hiring, evaluation, and promotion.
Great, thanks, John. So building on that first cornerstone, the importance of faculty, full-time and part-time, using evidence-based practice. One of the developments of the past couple decades that's particularly notable is the growth of research that shows that teaching and learning are key to improving student success and closing the equity gap. Secondly, that faculty are crucial actors in shaping students' campus experience, and connecting faculty with students makes an enormous difference for student success. As we drill down in that research, we see that it's not only a question that, faculty in general are important or teaching and learning is important. There's specific kinds of practices that make a difference. There's all sorts of research and that spans disciplines, different types of institutions, different approaches. One of the key, most salient points of powerful practice is active learning, engaging students in actively constructing knowledge through questioning, through research, through problem solving, through creating and communicating their knowledge. This study is a really interesting and important study. It was published this spring in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and it reviewed a wide range, hundreds of different studies. It's kind of a meta study or a meta-analysis. And what it showed is that faculty who employed active learning strategies, and this is focusing on STEM courses, showed higher outcomes for all students, measured by very concrete markers. Notably, African American, Latinx, and Native American students benefited the most. So in this way, it actually reduced the equity gap. It improved outcomes for all, but particularly for the students who need the most kinds of support. So active learning is one of the key things that we focus on in the toolkit. Another is culturally responsive and inclusive pedagogy and practice. And by this, we mean the kinds of pedagogies that recognize the assets that students are bringing into the classroom, cultural assets, the experiential assets, their relationships in their communities, their work, their family, all those different facets of culture that students are bringing into the classroom. We need to turn those into assets. We need to see our students' experience as an asset, not as a deficit. And when we do that, students benefit. It's part of the general process of connecting students' life experience with their academic experience, and that helps all students. So across, there's active learning, there's culturally responsive pedagogy, there's holistic pedagogy, inquiry learning, there's high impact practices, first year experiences, open educational resources, growth mindset. There's a wide range of different kinds of pedagogies and practices that have been shown and to make a measurable difference for students. Across all of these, there's two really key common themes. First is that faculty design experiences where students actively explore ideas, ask questions, and solve meaningful, authentic problems. And secondly, the experiences that faculty design help students make connections between their academic experience and their lived experience, and in so doing, take ownership of the learning process. Those two key themes, as it's been shown, make a difference in almost any kind of classroom.
And so to bring these evidence-based pedagogies to scale, to pilot them, to have the support needed to learn about what's working and to understand why that's working, and then to scale the use of these practices across many sections of a course and many courses across an institution, we know that professional learning is vital. A really important study from a few years ago by Condon and colleagues entitled Faculty Development and Student Learning, Assessing the Connections, shows that well-designed faculty development yields great value. The connections, for example, between changes faculty make in assignments and changes in student learning are clear. So there's three key points here. One is that improved student learning depends on faculty learning and evolution of practice. We think also about that fourth cornerstone, about the ways that institutions must support faculty to engage in the challenging work of rethinking their pedagogy, curriculum, and everyday practice. It's not easy work. And it's nearly impossible to do this well if institutions aren't investing in it and supporting faculty through this. We know that high impact professional development is key to building equity and student success. So what does that mean? Well, to make professional learning high impact, we know that when professional learning done well, it makes a difference. So helping faculty learn about and adapt new approaches to their courses, supporting faculty as they test new approaches in practice, advancing changes at scale, stimulating the growth of a culture of teaching and learning excellence. If an institution is investing, is creating the structures that demonstrate to faculty that time spent on deep professional learning is going to mean something and is going to have a meaningful impact on their work, then we know we're headed in the right direction.
So you might say, well, that all sounds nice, but we are in the middle of a crisis. We're living through an upheaval like none of us have ever experienced before, with COVID-19, with ongoing debates about the nature of justice in our society. We don't have time for this. We would argue, in fact, that professional learning, support for quality teaching and learning improvement is more important than ever. That as we deal with distance education or physically distanced classrooms, faculty need support for thinking about how do we make those experiences meaningful to students? How do we engage students? How do we keep them coming to school and learning? Similarly, how do we adjust and take into account the powerful questions that have been raised about equity and social justice at this critical moment? Finally, it's more clear than ever before that our institutions have to become adaptive learning institutions, and we need adaptive leaders, including leaders drawn from the faculty who are engaged in an ongoing process of learning and helping their institutions learn and change to meet the needs of this new era. So how do we do this? Luckily, we have a very powerful resource that is guiding our work and is a resource for the field and is infused in the toolkit. And this is the framework developed by a group called the New Learning Compact. It was led by Randy Bass, myself, and Laura Gambino. And it was drawing on a set of both the research from across the field, but also a key set of national leaders that Jon took part in this, Isis Arcevega, Adriana Cazar, Erigine Sorcinelli. These are all names that if you know about professional learning, these are incredibly important, thoughtful leaders who came together to develop a framework or a set of principles for how to make professional learning high impact. The key aspect of the framework is a set of principles and inquiry questions that emerge around 4 dimensions of high impact practice. The first is individual. How do we help individual faculty and staff practitioners actually change what they do in their engagement with students? How do we help them engage with evidence-based practices? How do we help them become more reflective and examine what's happening? How do we help them engage in an ongoing continuous evolution? Secondly, we know that while the individual is crucial, that we learn best together. Students learn best in community. Same is true for faculty. How do we bring groups of faculty and staff together in effective ways to support each other and engage in the ongoing work of making change? Third, as Jon has noted earlier, none of this happens without institutional support. What kinds of campus cultures, structures, policies, and practices at the institutional level are needed to ensure that professional learning is high impact? And fourth, institutions don't live in a vacuum. We're part of state systems, we're part of accreditation systems, funding systems, disciplinary associations. There's all sorts of other actors in the education ecosystem. How do we mobilize and take advantage of those groups and forces and resources as we try to support faculty and staff in the change process?
So this brings us to the design of this new teaching and learning toolkit. On the left, you see the 4 cornerstones that we showed you at the beginning of the presentation. And so we're building on these cornerstones in the structure of the toolkit. Each of those 4 cornerstones maps to the first 4 chapters on evidence-based pedagogy and practice, on supporting student success, creating a community of learner teachers, and on the need for strategic action to support teaching and learning. The new Learning Compact framework that Bret just discussed is threaded in really important ways, especially through chapters 3 and 4, but indeed throughout the entire toolkit. Chapter 5, A Hub for Innovation and Change, focuses on the nuts and bolts of building a professional learning hub. These are often called centers for teaching and learning, but we know they take a different form at every institution depending on the size of the institution, the unique context, available resources. And so we think of these as professional learning hubs, and that chapter provides the evidence and resources and tools needed to design a new hub or to strengthen an existing program on your campus. And then finally, an appendix that speaks to our work in this current moment of teaching and learning in times of upheaval. So this is the inside of the toolkit, and just an example of what you'll find. A key element throughout all of these chapters is a rich narrative that reviews the best new research. You'll find evidence around the pedagogies and practices that Bret talked about a little while ago. Evidence for the need for holistic student supports and the engagement of full-time and part-time faculty in those supports. Evidence for the impact of professional learning done well. Quite a deep body of research for us to synthesize and bring to you here. And that's a really important element that we think distinguishes this resource from others. We also want to help college teams using the toolkit to make the case. And so you'll find at the end of each chapter a worksheet that is designed to do just that, to help you digest what you find in this research, and then think about how you'll communicate that to stakeholders at your institution, faculty, colleagues, college leaders, and others. You'll also find these sidebars throughout each chapter presenting key resources. And if you're using the PDF that we'll link to in a couple of minutes, you'll find links to getting started resources, scholarly sources, practical guides to actually implement much of what you're learning about. And so in this example right here, there's a considerable list of key evidence-based pedagogies with links and references to take you to the best resources out there for each one.
There's also sidebars that flesh out the story in another way. We reached out to campuses doing impressive work around the country and gathered their stories. So in each chapter, there are sidebars that spotlight interesting, powerful, revealing stories drawn from what folks are doing in real life. This helps you and any reader make this real. Think about what does this actually look like on the ground every day. Finally, at the end of each chapter is a set of active learning tools, worksheets that are designed to help teams make the connection between what they're reading and the situation on their campus, thinking about how to apply what they're learning to meet the goals and needs of their campus. It particularly builds around the processes of self-assessment, looking at current practice, both in teaching and learning, holistic student support, and in professional learning. And then thinking about how are we going to improve it? How are we going to improve this situation? How are we going to improve what we do? And making those plans step by step as a collaborative team. So that process brings together all the different elements of the toolkit and turns it into a real active learning, dynamic resource, an active learning resource that teams can use. We know we learn most when we actually are applying our learning. This suggests ways for teams to learn deeply about the issues at stake here and to develop the plans that will allow them to make real change. And as they do so, to think both about short-term immediate needs, what's going on right now on our campuses. How do we help faculty adapt to this new reality? And at the same time, build long-term institutional capacity. So seizing the moment and leveraging that to make needed long-term change.
And so we think of this as a living document. We're releasing it into the field. It was mid-September when we released it. We began immediately working with campus teams in the ATD network and the Frontier set to test the toolkit in practice, and we're really excited about that work underway. There's a link inside the toolkit to provide us feedback on how it's working for you and to share stories of the teaching and learning work going on at your institution so that we can feature those in a 2.0 version that we are hoping to put out into the field next year. We're going to be gathering more stories, adding to the richness of the resource. If there's new important research that emerges over the next several months, we'll certainly weave that in. And we may update the tools as well based on what we're seeing and how it's working and how teams are using it for their planning and assessment work at their campuses. So we want to thank you for your time. Bret and I have our email addresses in the lower left-hand corner, and we would love to be in conversation with you as you dig into this work. The link to the toolkit is in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. We invite you to download it. The PDF is free. There are modifiable, editable Microsoft Word documents that have the sets of worksheets from each chapter of the toolkit. All of that is there for you on the ATD website, free to download and to use. We're excited to see how this looks at your institution, and we're excited to hear from you. We thank you for your time and your energy, and we wish you all the best.